All right, welcome to Wednesday night Sunday school. It's good to see all your shiny faces. We're going to run through this just like we always do. I'll take breaks after each main point so you guys can ask questions. So hopefully this makes sense tonight, and we will jump into this as we continue through basic Christian belief. All right, so tonight we're going to ask the question, what is a human being? Which is a funny question to ask because it feels like it should answer itself. But how you answer that question is super important, especially when it comes to our understanding of our relationship with God, especially when you put it in the context of the world we live in, just even from the place of if you're a human being in the sense that you're a human being in the animal kingdom and you have no control over your responses because you're just an animal, or are you a human being with free will and the ability to choose, and even though you feel like doing something, you can not do that thing. Even just in that, you can see why what is a human being becomes important. So here's what we believe. First and foremost, it's not a weird question. The Bible itself asks that question. Psalms 8, 3 and 4 says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is a man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? So even the psalmists are writing, what is this thing? Why are we here? What is a man? The Christian doctrine of humanity sees the human person as a man made in God's image, either a man or woman by God's making, fallen through Adam's historical sin, formed for vocation unto God, and redeemable in through the God-man Jesus Christ. So that is the big wordy sentence that is the doctrine of humanity. So let's break it down further. For what is a human being? It's all girded upon that first one there. Humans are created in God's image, or the Imago Dei is the Latin, where I'm super important because I know big words way of saying it. Genesis 1, 26 and 27, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. We believe, first up, we believe that image is not something we do, but it's something that we are. It's not a trait. It's not like we got a little bit of image on us, but it literally is who we are. And that's across the board, both believer and non-believer. All human beings are created in the image of God. We're the only living thing made in God's image. That separates us from angels on the one hand and creation on the other. First and foremost, our definitive identity by the making of God. We must learn to live between the divine over us and have dominion over the creation under us. We are, in fact, neither of those things. We are not gods, and we are not animals. And this is where you will see deviation in philosophy. So some people, like you get into New Age, pantheism, all the weird ones, they will lean more towards that we are all our own gods. If you're a podcaster, Russell Brand and his new brand of New Age garbage, that's what he's always saying is we are our own God. So the idea being that we have like a bit of God in us, or like there's something about like a divine spark, or all that stuff is garbage, and it's not what we believe. In the same right, you have the other side of it where we are animals with no control over our impulses or what we do. And so since if you feel something or if you have something inside of you that drives you to do something, you have no way of overcoming that thing, and you have to do that thing because that's how you are made. And that is not biblical and not correct. So what is super unique about human beings is that we are created in God's image, and we exist between creation and the Creator. We are not so we have dominion over creation, and that creation works for us, and in the same right, God has dominion over us. But you are not an animal. You are not a slave to your wants and desires and needs. You have control. You can practice self-denial. You can be something different than what it is you feel like you are. These are all basic Christian beliefs. The next part here, before we do questions, This part's really important because it doesn't get preached a lot, but it lets you understand, especially from the Hebrew end of things, for you guys that like the Old Testament stuff. Hebrews in Genesis 1 for the image of God is Betzalim Elohim instead of Imago Dei. That's the Hebrew there. So Betzalim in English is the word image, but that's also the same word for idol. So it can be translated image of God when you say, so Elohim is another name for God. So Betzalim is image or idol. Elohim is God, so image, God, image of God. But you can also translate it idol of God, which then leads us to an understanding of what's going on in the ancient Near East. Remember, the whole Bible from front to back warns against idolatry and worshiping of idols. If you've been coming on Sunday, we've talked about Paul in Acts is constantly telling the Gentiles, why are you worshiping things you're making with your own hands? Don't make idols. Don't have graven images. It's one of the 10 Commandments, right? Like, thou shalt have no other graven image. That's the same word there. No idol. All of that is summed up in the Genesis, that very beginning of creation, because we are the representation of God. So what is an idol, right? Like if I carve out some little thing and say this is God, well, this is a representation of God, right? Like I made this thing so that you will know what my God is because I carved this thing. God makes us out of clay, right? He carves us, shapes us, forms us into his image as a representation of him on earth. And so where you go, where we exist, where we are, God is seen in us, both believer and non-believer, which is your consciousness, right? Like that thing that science and nobody can understand, like why do humans why can you think and reason things? Like, why can we do things that maybe are not the best for me, but the best for the whole? Like, why do we have all these questions about life and existence and, what's right, what's wrong? All of that is from that place of consciousness. Consciousness points to creator, right? And so that being then that we are this representation of God. The other interesting thing here for the Hebrew is the root word is for Betzalim is zel, which means shadow. So the Hebrews, like Jewish people then, rabbis sometimes will teach that humanity, because God is the light of the world, then God shining through us, then we become the shadow of God upon creation. And so that is the whole concept then inside of this Imago Dei, which brings us to the third point here, and then we'll ask questions. Since we're created in the image of God, as the bearer of his likeness in this world, we believe all life is sacred and a representation of the beauty of God. There is no mistake in how you were made. All humans, as God created them, are beautiful and sacred. Any deviation from that idea is a sinful perversion and a twisting of the design of God in practical form. To see a human person, whether a baby in the womb through a monitor, a teenager with Down syndrome at the park, or an elderly person lying in a nursing home bed, unable to care for themselves any longer, is to see an image bearer, to catch a shadow of the glory of the one who made us. That is the foundation of Christianity. That is why Christians are pro-life. That is why Christians do not support transgender ideas. That is why, so whenever those things come up, you got to be careful with how you interact with people, because we live in a world where people freak out if you question anything or if you say anything. But the foundation for the doctrine, for why Christians believe these things that we believe, is this. There is no mistake. There is no, this is messed up. There is no, this thing, that's not how this was put together and designed. And when you look at creation, we should look at it through God's eyes, which is something we all should be praying and asking for, because whether you like it or not, a lot of times we look through it through world eyes. We see things like, they're not attractive by world standards, or they don't look masculine enough, they don't look feminine, like these ideas that start to permeate society that then somehow we go well, that's not right and God messed this up, or that's not what's intended. No, God's creative. And so all things are beautiful in the eyes of God. All creation has power and authority and is sacred because you're created in his image. And so as Christians, we should celebrate that across the board, across the spectrum of how people live and act in their own skin. But there should always be a desire to help people discover they're not garbage, right? Like you don't want people in life to feel like they're less than or they don't measure up or they're unloved because of some like physical thing. That's somebody who needs to hear the truth and love of the gospel that says you're created in the image of God, just as you are. You are a bearer of his sacredness, which means then you're sacred, which means you have value and worth, right? So that's why this is important. So questions on Imago Dei? Yes. Well, I mean, all of creation is marred by sin and by brokenness. And so you deal with that the same way we deal with everything, in that we are a community who, that's what I'm saying. Like, so when you say, I have to wear glasses or I have Down syndrome, all of those are preconceived constructs by society to say that those things are negative. The only reason that we feel like any of that is negative is because somewhere along the line somebody decided this wasn't attractive or this wasn't desirable or this is a negative thing. Whereas what the Imago Dei teaches is, no, everything has purpose and has meaning and has design and reason. And so like Down syndrome people, handicapped people, especially handicapped people, it's such a callous thing to me when people go, that's not fair to them. Well, have you asked them? Like what they think and what they believe about life and where they live, and yeah, I mean it's detrimental, yeah, and things maybe don't work the way they want. Their bodies don't respond the way they want, but if asked, they still are autonomous enough to tell you they would rather be alive than not, and still would rather be here as they are. And so to try to say, like it's just the world we live in. This idea that there's like perfect existence for how each person should be, and anything that comes along that doesn't fit whatever the ideal is, somehow then is like, how do we account for this in the story of the Imago Dei, or that? Well, I don't, like, God is huge and vast, so wouldn't his image bearers be huge and vast too in the way that we look and behave and act, because we're still a representation. So remember, you're created in the image of God, and then the context that you are in there. So there's different schools of thought. Here at Vintage, our school of thought is this: image of God is the characteristics of God that we can be in the image of without becoming God, right? So you're not omniscient, you're not all-knowing, because we're still finite. You're not everywhere at once. You're not all-powerful, but you can be holy because he's in you, right? You have the ability to accept Christ. Christ can make you holy. You can know truth. You can reason. You can think. So that's one aspect of it. And we'll get into it when we talk about body and soul. But then there's also created in the image, in that God becomes incarnate in Christ. And so then there's that aspect too, that, the image that we have is that image of Jesus. Does that make sense? In what context, Mom? What are you talking about? Right. No, we're all born into sin. So when Adam sins and breaks creation, that sin then is throughout all of human beings. So everybody is born into sin. So when God judges a person, he judges each person on an individual case. So it's the old philosophy, tabula rasa. You're born a blank slate. Everybody is, right? So you come out blank slate, and then there's variable factors within creation that begin to shape that, how that is. So one of the factors is your genetics, right? Like I'm fat because my parents are fat, right? So, right. So yes, in a quick wit, in a sense, right. So and brilliant. Yes, I'm so smart because my mom's right. So you have the genetic influences, right? Like that's part of it. But then you also have, like, the nature versus nurture argument is pretty much a dead argument in psychology anymore, because they've come to the place of, like, it's both. Like, you have your nature that is what you bring in from your genetics, right? And that's an influence on your blank slate. That affects, like, certain things you'll be able to do and be. And then you also have your environment and what you grow up and what you're around. What Christians do that's a little different than the world we live in today is you're still responsible for how you react to the nature and nurture of who you are. So, and it's like we used to tell edge kids, at some point, like so your parents are terrible and you've had a bad experience, like you still have to assimilate into culture. So I don't care if you're raised in a drug house where everybody's shooting each other and cusses like sailors. That's not how normal people work. And so part of the church's job, I think, is to train people. It's about, it takes a village. It's such a true statement with kids. But for us, does that make sense in what you're? Well, there is. He does take it into account because Christ died and brought grace. I mean, the whole nature of the new covenant is the fact that we aren't capable of making ourselves good. Right. Right. That's right. We'll live longer in a blizzard. Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's the idea though that there is no redemption. So the difference, and that is a naturalism argument. That's what I'm talking about. How you're pushing down and making us creation and not in between creator and creation. What you're saying is like a dog is a dog is a dog, and so it's not fair for you to say to the dog you should be like a camel, because that's a dog. It was born a dog, raised a dog. It's been a dog its whole life, and now you're saying it's supposed to act like a camel. And what you're telling me is that somehow we all become camels. Which exactly, right? We're all sinners, fallen short of the glory of God. Christ redeems us and lives in us and changes the things. Like there's things about my personality and who I am that I can point solely to. It's God at work in my life. Is why I do them. It's not my nature. It's not who I am. Like I don't like people. I don't. Like if left to my own devices, I would live by myself in a basement and paint the devil. Like that's what I would do. But it's God at work on who you are that he shapes and changes you. And then, you have to it's why every day you take control of your mind. It's an inner fight that you have. And that's where grace comes in. But it's a weird idea to be like, no, what you need to say is people can't change. It's a sound argument to say that no matter what, nobody can change. Lepers don't change their spots. The only thing that changes people is Christ. And so when somebody goes like, well, people are who they are, you go, that's exactly right. That's why Jesus died. If you could change, there's no need for the cross. Because then you're into what they call, here's some big words, you got a pen? You're in moral therapeutic deism, which is the religion of America. So moralistic means that mankind left to its own devices will figure out what's right and wrong. Well, how we'll figure that out ourselves. And by figuring that out, we'll do it through therapy. So we'll read self-help books, we'll go to counselors, we'll take drugs, whatever we got to do. And then God exists. He's a deistic God, so he exists, but he's not involved. He's not like working and shaping and in it. That's modern American religion, is this idea that, and all of that is bunk. Like, you have no basis for morality without Christ. None. Like, who decides? You just descend into relativism. Like, if you say purple is bad, well, and I go, that's ridiculous. You go, well, that's what I think. Well, how do we argue that? Right? You're just, and that's the think about the world you live in. Like, it's this. No, it's that. Well, we're not arguing from any sort of place other than opinion, and that's broken. And then therapy is a big part of American culture. That, like, getting a 12-step program, read the right book, be your best you now. You can fix yourself. You can, and you no matter what paint you put on it, you still are condemned to death. And so there's a vast difference between that and accepting Christ changes who you are. It's like we always say at the edge, we say it here. We love you so that Christ can change you. You don't change so Christ will love you. Does that make sense? Deism. It's moralistic, therapeutic deism. That is where, yeah, it's America. That's the world we live in. Like, we'll figure out right and wrong because people can inherently will just figure out, if you put enough people in a room, enough people will come up with what's right, and then we'll write laws and we'll help each other. And if you don't see why I'm right, then you just need to listen to the group, because the group has figured this out, and you're just archaic and left behind, and you're not awake enough to catch on to what's going on. Oh, it's 100% tribalism. And then how are we going to teach you why we're right and you're wrong? Therapy. We're going to put you into therapy, into 12-step programs, and reading books, and watching the right movies and the right documentaries, and listening to the right gurus and the right speakers. And then in the midst of all of that, there still has to be spirituality, right? We still have to have this desire for, some sort of something. So then God's deistic. He's transcendent, but he's not in creation working. Yes? I do not think, left to its own devices, mankind will ever choose the right thing. I think mankind are a prideful, selfish, power-driven, greed-driven people. Yeah, well, I don't know. Who knows why they came up with that? But you just look at humanity. Just look at human history. Like, human history consists of denial of God, denial of community, power, control, war, and then the whole empire falling apart, and then some other new empire rising up and doing that. I mean, that is history over and over. Like, Rome did it, Germany did it, Russia did it. Russia's trying to do it again. Like, that it's just, that's what we do. We left to our own devices, because what happens is, if you remove God and you remove the basis for morality, then somebody, usually the state or some system, becomes the basis for that morality, and then people won't conform, right? Like, if it's Karl Marx, like Marx said, like, the proletariat's going to rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie, and you're going to have class warfare. That's the whole idea. Well, then who's going to run it? Well, the proletariat. Well, aren't they the bourgeoisie now? Like, didn't they just switch places and then, like, somebody's corrupt and somebody's driven by power? That's depravity of human beings. And so while I believe in the midst of that system, humans do good things, I think those good things happen because God is in the broken system. And I think anytime you see good things happen, even when it's a secular good thing, I think that's still because that secular person is in the image of God and is capable of good, even if they don't realize that good is because of God. Does that make sense? Right. 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 That makes sense. Anybody's brain hurt yet? All right. If it didn't, then it will now. Humans exist as body and soul. This is called the doctrine of dichotomy. There is a doctrine of trichotomy, which is Catholic. Some of the Anglican churches believe that. So we believe here at the church, it's the most straightforward. It's what most Christians believe. The difference is we believe there's body and soul. Trichotomy says there's body, soul, and spirit. So because there's some verses in the New Testament where they use spirit and soul interchangeably, and so they tried to split it into three. It's also a Greek influence. So the Greeks believed, so Greek, like without getting too boring, Hellenistic Greek philosophy was every person has a divine spark or spirit within them that dwells within a soul that is encapsulated in your body. And the body is finite, the soul and the spirit are infinite. So anytime you hear like that type of teaching or thought process, that's Greek influence on things. Hebrews believe the body and soul are, and this may sound familiar from last week, are distinctly together. So they can never be separated. They're one thing, but they are distinct, much like the Trinity. And so this is important, though, because what that means then is inside of every human being, there's two categories. There's your inward and your outward man. Our outward existence is our physical body. Our inward existence is mind, heart, spirit, those things that you read in the Bible. This is solely unique to us in creation. There's nothing else in creation like that. No, like your dog doesn't have a soul. I'm sorry if that breaks your heart. Like you have a soul and a body. Those two things collectively make you a human. It also makes you unique in God's creation, that you are that way. We also believe then that there's no separation of those two things. How many of you were taught growing up, your body will pass away and die, but your soul will go to heaven, your body will stay on earth? That's not biblical. So Bible-wise, redemption, the finality of Revelation and Christ returning is your body and your soul together, redeemed as Christ is redeemed. So does that mean we'll have this same broken body? No, right? Because Jesus doesn't have the same body when he comes back from the dead and he's bouncing around and doing weird things. So same thing, but you still, like your body and your soul are what make you human, and there's nothing in the Bible to say that like one will go away. So you'll still look like a human being when you're in heaven. Because of that, we believe that human beings need to be ministered to through these two things. This is a big part of Vintage, and it's why we do the things we do. So we believe there's an inward ministry and an outward ministry. So we minister to people physically by considering health, diet, and exercise. And so that's why, like, it's important to us. People have food, they have a roof over their head, they have heat, they have, like, you gotta, like, your outward needs. If you don't meet outward needs, people don't care about inward needs, right? Like you guys that teach know that. That's why every teacher I know in Decatur has like food stashed in their room, because when the kid shows up who is being a train wreck, 9 times out of 10 they didn't eat anything last night for dinner, they maybe didn't eat breakfast, and so you sneak them food. Like you got to meet these outward needs so then we can meet inward. So we will minister to you emotionally with love and compassion, intellectually by answering questions biblically, volitionally by appealing to their will for obedience, familially by dealing with issues related to the family of origin and current family dynamic, as well as socially by dealing with the social network and interpersonal relationships both in and out of the church. So the idea then that your body and soul then shapes how we do ministry to you and how you do ministry to people. And so when we think about helping people, when we think about being the church, it's important to remember this is important, that you meet outward and inward needs so that people can holistically then heal. Does that make sense? Questions on this one? Are we good? I think our bodies will be redeemed in heaven. I hope when we get to heaven that this whole how our body works thing, we can go, that's the product of the fall, right? One of the big questions we had in Bible college is the way our body works a product of the fall. Is a bathroom time fall problem, or was that pre-creation? Or pre-Adam being, we don't know. So I don't mind being fat. I just don't want there to be the repercussions of being fat. Right? I'd be fine in heaven if we get there and he's like, hey, you're heavy, but you don't have high blood pressure. You're not going to have a stroke. You're not going to die younger. Like, this, I'm just big. Like, cool. Like, let's get bigger. Where's the table? So, yeah. Yeah. Yes, sure. Well, okay, we just were talking about cremation this weekend. Here's the thing with cremation that always cracks me up when people talk about it. I know, but listen, Moses died in a wet, nasty area, right? There's no coffin. So how'd they bury Moses? I'll tell you how. God put him under a rock. So now what happened, do you think happened to Moses? But for 3,000 years, what do you think happened to Moses' body? It's gone. There ain't nothing there. So how's that any different than if we take grandma down and put her in a furnace and burn her body up? Like, it's so funny to me that you think God's going to somehow resurrect you from the dead, all of the dead, be it, premillennial with the rapture, be it amillennial just at the end of time. Like, he's going to do all of this, but like somehow because you burnt your body, God's like, man, I don't know what we're going to do. Sorry, Edna can't come because her husband burned her because he couldn't afford a coffin. Why is her soul with her body? No, I said your soul and your body make you you. Okay. When you die, correct. Right. God will redeem your body. Or maybe when you get to heaven, he'll give you a new body. You'll still have a body, though, because it's what makes you human. What I'm saying is it's not New Ageism, where you're going to, like, go to heaven and, like, float around like Atman meets Brahman, and we're going to exist in nirvana as one giant spiritual energy in space because we're all little gods. Like, that's not what's going to happen. Janine here will be Janine there. Yes. Yes. No, you're so like when this thing dies, then we start what happens after death. Now, if you don't know, there's not a lot of information there. Hence why humans keep going, wonder what happens when you die. We know this, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, right? So somehow, some way, whatever that means, we're with God in paradise, but when you're with God, you are with God with body, with soul, because you're still going to be you. Yes. you're like, it's semantics. I mean, you got to be careful with how you word it. It's not that God's trying to understand the experience so much as Christ has to be able to experience all of what it means to be human. So because there are some like Jehovah's Witness and some of the weird cults out there will say that Christ could turn on and off his divineness. Like, it's Wednesday, I'm feeling godly. Like, so you got to be like, but that's not right. Like, he's fully human, fully God on earth and faces every temptation. No, he knows what death is. That's why he sends Christ. Right. No, and there are some weird, like, I mean, that's the Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. Yeah, so that is that whole, like, I want to experience the human condition and the human, and that's all secular humanism sneaking into Christianity and weird philosophy stuff that's not biblical. We good? Right. Yeah, there are those. Yes, and that's those weird verses about there's no marriage in heaven and and we're not real sure what Jesus is driving at. Um, the best I've ever heard was, Doc Henderson, who was our New Testament prof in college. He used to say, you don't need to view it as grief. It's how, like, I love my spouse or I love my kids, and it doesn't seem fair that when you need to view it as even though we have relationship with God here, we are still not in direct relationship with God here. There still is the veil of sin, right? Like, this world is still, we've never lived free from sin. Like, the mark of sin is more than just our temptations on choosing right and wrong. There's also the breaking of creation that we've never existed outside of. And so heaven is that. And so there's some aspect, I think that's what Christ was getting at, is like, when you get there, these things that are valuable to you to hear, that you love and you care about, that won't be there, because that's going to be something totally different than you've ever experienced. Does that make sense? So what? Right. Yeah, and it is, and yeah, I mean that, finding whatever that is and what that looks like, but also you have they call it the New Eden, and so God pre-fall puts man and woman into a marriage relationship, and presides over them and tells them to multiply, and so there is still, like, so if it's the New Eden, then it's another one of those, like, God didn't say it because it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is, hey, live right and live this way, and then when we get there, we'll deal with that. I think when Grandma would say that, I think she was saying, no, yeah, no, I think she used to say that to me too. I'm pretty sure she's quoting when Jesus says that no man or woman knows the day or the hour when the Lord will return, which is not in context at all for what she's telling you. So really, that's just Grandma going, "You're annoying me," Yeah. Yeah, well, you have faith of a child to enter into heaven. I'll tell you right now, no mind can comprehend. 1 Corinthians 2:9 says, as it is written, I have not seen, nor ear heard, nor either have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. Well, I mean, that's... well, and also, this isn't about heaven. Like, think about what he's saying here. Hold on. Go. Do it, internet. Yeah, for real. It says, we do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age, or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. We declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understand it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. These are the things that God has revealed to us by his Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. What we received is not the spirit of this world, but the Spirit is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given to us. So it's not, you actually do know it, because it's what this says. So it's Grandma just telling you to shut up. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Oh, this is when I will look them right in the face and say, they're waiting for you and they want to be with you too. And there's nothing wrong in your grief to desire that. Because to me, at that point, when somebody is that broken, when they've lost a child or they've lost a spouse, they don't care. Yeah, no, that's usually what I do too. Is just, I think in the context of what Jesus is saying is like you won't be married. I don't think that is so much the context of you won't, like want to see or be or know them. I think it's in the context of how we view marriage here. You know what I mean? That like it's this like you're in your private, intimate relationship with one person that I think that's different in heaven. Not so much the other way with it. And children, I think is losing a kid. Like it is the hardest. That's the hardest thing about pastoring. So a lot of times with that, like I just go, hey, death is terrible. I don't have any answers for you. I wish I did. Other than this, God loves you, and his plan for you is not for you to suffer in this, but his plan for you is to be in a church body who will love you and care for you and allow you to grieve in whatever way you need to grieve. And so what do you need me to do? Do you want me to get food for you? Do you want me to leave you alone? Do you want me to check in on you? Like, what do you want me to do? Because people who have lost children, in my experience, are like it's such a broken, wrong way to live. Like that's just not how creation is supposed to work. And the church, more than anyone, should be there to love and care and hope for that person. And so like if some, mom goes, well, I know, like I had that Edge kid who his brother accidentally shot him. They were playing with a handgun and the mom was like, well, I know he came to church and he told me he was reading his Bible and, I just, I'm like, yeah, he didn't. I prayed with him and he'll be in heaven. And she's like, well, I just wish I could go be with him. Yeah. Why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you want, that is the weight of grief. I think every parent I've ever talked to who's lost a kid, that's the thing, is a part of you is where they are and you can't be where they are. And there's this inner longing for you to be there, and there's no way for you to close that gap, and so you just stand in the torment of that. And I think, as pastors and as lay people, your best is just to hug people, love people, and shut your mouth. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what, Dan, though, I have, like, in those experiences, I have had times with people that if you do the work at the beginning, where you have that conversation, you do get moments as they heal to say that, like to have those theological moments of like, hey, God lost a kid. Like he buried and like he went, so there are those things, but you just got to allow people to grieve. Does that make sense? My advice always is just shut up. 9 times out of 10, the best thing you can do is just shut your mouth. Just say, hey, I love you, and I'm here for you, and I'll sit here until the sun sets with you if you want. But I don't have, so. Yeah, walk through. Right. 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 Yeah. 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 No, yeah. Well, you guys walk through. We could talk for weeks about stupid things Christians have said in in the right place, thinking they were helping, that was wildly detrimental to somebody in a place of grief. Yeah. How are you here? Oh, I can't imagine what you must be feeling. Right, so shut up. Right, yeah, you can't imagine. Why are you talking? You know? And it's because people are uncomfortable, but that's why I always try to help. Just like, listen, you want the best advice? Shut up. Just say, hey, I love you. I'm praying for you. You got my phone number. When you're ready, call me. Do you have food? Like, meet the outward need. Do you have food? Is your power bills and everything's good? Are you able to take? Okay, I'm going to leave you alone to grieve. And get a hold of me if you need to. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and especially that. If you tell somebody you're going to call and check on them, then, call and check on them. And if you say, hey, I'm going to pray for you, pray for them. Don't just, especially in those situations, because that's when people need consistency most. All right, we're out of time. Prayer requests. We'll finish this. Well, we do it every Wednesday. We'll cover that point next week, and we'll jump into whatever we hit. Yeah.